Hey, it's ... Welcome back to the 9 Arts podcast. Excited to have you all here with us today for our inaugural recording, and wanted to give a little bit of context on why we decided to move forward with these podcasts. We have published the State of the Art report for the year 2021. This report focuses on behaviors and beliefs about the process of creating meaningful art experiences in the built environment. And these podcasts are really the background to bring the heart and soul to the data, the story behind the numbers, and the human element and human connection of why this topic is so important to us. Today on the show, we have Chad McWhinney. He talks about creating authentic experiences, and he really looks at the perspective of a new project through finding out everything from what you do need, but also what you don't need. So bringing something new to a neighborhood, something new to a city, something that is fresh and additive to the community. Chad is what I would call a serial mega supernova entrepreneur. He started multiple companies and built really iconic places in some of the biggest growing downtown cities in America. So Union Station and Dairy Block in Denver. He's built hotels in Boston, California, Seattle, and Austin, Texas. So he has a huge impact on the world that we live in, and I'm very excited to have him on the show today. Enjoy.
Great. So I'm Chad McWhinney, co-founder and CEO of McWhinney. And we got started many years ago selling strawberries on roadside strawberry stands in Southern California. And as we did that, we met a lot of very successful real estate investors and developers. And in our 20s, my brother and I decided that we wanted to be in the long-term real estate investment business. And that's kind of how we got to where we are today. And I'd say the projects that we're most excited about right now are the fully integrated mixed-use projects, because McWhinney does all product types. We're able to look at very large, complex mixed-use projects, understand the food group in all of them, and how to synergistically have all the uses work together to make sure the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Well, there's not many people who are working in different industry types like you do. So are there any trends that you're seeing right now, perhaps in different segments that you're working in, that are, quite noteworthy?
I'd say retail is definitely changing. Retail that is experiential, that is authentic, that is an experience. Dairy Block, Union Station, et cetera, is doing very well. Retail that is something that you can just buy on Amazon or something like that is not doing as well. And so the trends that we're seeing is people want experience. People want authentic experiences, and that's something that I think both McWhinney and Sage do very well. And we're just getting started.
That's great. Well, when you think about creating an authentic experience, what does that mean to you?
It means developing a very clear vision. It starts with listening to the community and the customers and what they authentically want, creating a very strong vision and a brand, communicating that to all team members involved, and then staying true to that brand and how we execute and operate, and that has the ability to create authenticity.
Are there any projects, you mentioned Dairy Block, that you feel like really developed that sense of authenticity and that sense of place really well? And could you give us a few examples of what in particular you feel like stands out?
Yeah, so if you look at like Denver Union Station, we surveyed several hundred people in the community before we started that project, and what we heard was that the community. Well, first we heard what the community didn't want. They didn't want chains and national brands and things like that. And what we heard is we want a place to take our family and friends, a place to hang out. And so we took all that information and worked with AOR and came up with the tagline Denver's Living Room, and that we're going to create a place that's Denver's living room. And then the designers all designed to that. And when you go there today, it's really the best of Colorado. We don't allow any national brands in there, and unless they started like Snooze from Denver. And I think we've stayed on brand and exceeded people's expectations.
That's great. And how does art and culture align with the brand vision in those cases?
Art and culture is a very, very important component of what we do as a company. And We think that it is, Steve Jobs at Apple once said, a lot of people think design is how something looks. And he said, to a certain extent, that's true. But if you peel it back, it's really not how things look; it's how they work.
Mm.
And art and culture really allows us to showcase a brand. In the case of Dairy Block, having a maker's alley, and then working with artists to create art that honored the maker's theme, et cetera. Right as you walk in, that's an example of how arts and culture helps us tell the story and really engage the customer in what we're trying to do.
Well, certainly the brand impact is huge. And then are there business benefits that you think about or goals of incorporating art and also the social impact and community engagement side? Are those factors that are in your mind when you're going about developing that vision?
Absolutely, this is a great bottom line investment. In fact, it increases our return. There's a really good book out there called The Experience Economy, and they studied some of the best companies in the world that are far exceeding their peers, like Cirque du Soleil, for example. And what they concluded is if you want your customers to render you authentic, make sure when they experience your product, business, or service that you hear them say the words, wow, amazing, oh my gosh, or this is incredible 7 to 10 times. And so art and culture is one way that our customers say those words. I just gave a tour to a city this week of Dairy Block and Union Station. And I just walked behind and I listened as we did the tour. And just at Union Station alone, I think I heard those words 20 to 30 times.
Wow. Wow to the wow.
Yeah, wow, wow to the wow. I like that. Wow. Someone should write a book, wow to the wow.
Oh, that's super impressive. So in your role, I mean, you've got all these different factors at play from, working with cities to developing large scale infrastructure plans and a multidisciplinary approach across real estate development. Is working with art and artists more creative than other aspects of your projects or things that you get to do? Or is there creativity in everything you approach?
I'd say there's creativity in everything we approach, but by working with arts and culture, they bring creativity to the other disciplines as well.
Hmm.
And so, by working with you guys, for example, or Nine Dot, when we bring you in early and you understand the vision and the brand and what we're trying to create, you actually can help influence the design. So, like, for example, at Dairy Block, raising the parapet and making sure we have room for a beautiful maker's hand, for example. When you know early on about those types of things, you can do stuff like that. Obviously, when something's already designed and they come to you and say put a cool piece of art here or something like that, it's just different. It's not of, if you will.
Right. Well, is there anything that you've learned about art over the years, like its role or the artists themselves? You just mentioned incorporating early. I'm curious if there's anything else that you've learned.
But, I've learned it's really fun and that there's some incredible people out there. And what creates the best projects, the most authentic projects, it's not one person, it's not one designer, it's not one ownership group, it's not one tenant, et cetera. The best projects are really the ability of a team of people to harness the collective wisdom of a talented team of people, all rowing in direction of a common purpose, a common vision, an alignment of goals, et cetera. And that's what creates authenticity.
Wow. That sounds like a really hard thing to achieve, but totally worth it when you can do it.
Yeah, it's hard to achieve, and there's lots of vigorous debate. People say that's a stupid idea, or why would we do that? But I look at it like that's great. You want that all these different people, which have all these different disciplines and ideas, and you bring them together in a very productive, healthy way. You have vigorous debate, et cetera, and what comes out of that. For example, at Denver Union Station, at one point in time, the bar was going to be in the middle of the Great Hall.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of vigorous debate about that. And people are like, wait a minute, if this is Denver's living room, we shouldn't have a lot of commerce in the Great Hall. That should be a living room for people to hang out and enjoy. And so the bar got moved to where the ticket counter is. And there was a lot of vigorous debate about where to put the bar. And I think it turned out great. But that was the example of great idea, wrong idea, everyone putting their vision and thoughts together, and then the collective wisdom. Yeah, I'll give you a little story. So you've watched the TV show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Yeah.
So over the entire course of the show, they went back, and if you remember, you get three lifelines, right?
Right.
So 50-50. So your odds are 50%. You're going to get it right. You can phone a friend,
Mm-hmm.
and you can what?
Poll the audience.
Ask the audience. So over the entire course of the show, they went back and 50-50, the odds are 50%. When they phoned a friend, what percent of the time was the friend right over the entire course of the show?
Oh, 70%?
62%.
Wow.
When they polled the audience, what percent of the time over the entire course of the show was the collective wisdom of the audience right?
Oh, 95.
94%.
Wow. That's
So that's a good, yeah.
awesome.
And see, you just said wow right there. So that's a good example of a lot of times the collective wisdom of a group of reasonably informed, people, 94% of the time will get the answer right.
Hmm.
And so that's something I think both McWhinney and Sage do really well is, Denver Union Station isn't because of McWhinney, or it isn't because of Sage, or it isn't because of Nine Dot, or it isn't because of JNS. It's because of all of us. And we created a system and a structure that allowed us to think big and dream big. And then, everyone poured their heart and souls into it. I remember Union Station was getting ready to open, and I walked through one night, like at midnight. A guy was in there working on one of the bars up at the Cooper Lounge, and I stopped and I thanked him, and he said, "No, thank you." He goes, "It's an honor to work on a project like this," and he goes, "This is something that my grandkids are going to remember I was part of." And just the passion, and everyone wanted to be part of Denver Union Station, and I think every you know everything flows to a vision, and the stronger the vision, assuming you have the right structure and system set up, ownership structure, et cetera, the better it's going to turn out.
What a legacy project. And speaking of collaboration, I'm sure you've been involved in situations where you had a really great outcome from collaboration and perhaps one that didn't work quite as well or didn't bring the same synergy. Do you have any tips for people who are trying to build that A team?
Yeah, for me, it always starts with values. If you look at people, and you want them to share a vision, and this is human psychology, the very first thing people look at is what this person wanting me to do in alignment with my personal values. And if it is, then you go to step two. But if it's not, and we've been involved in projects before where at the very get go there was a misalignment of values. One person's thinking they want to create a strip center for cars, the other person's thinking pedestrian walkable mixed use, and it was just from a value standpoint, there was just a completely different way people saw the world, and that makes it hard. I liken it to you're trying to row upstream, and if you row hard enough, yeah, sometimes you can go upstream, but the amount of force and the amount of work and the amount of tension it takes to move versus when everyone's rowing together and you got the wind at your back.
Hmm. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share with me or our listeners today? People who maybe are, inspired by you or see what you've done and love being in your buildings and the places that you've created, not just the buildings themselves, but the areas outside of them. Any advice you might give or other things you'd like to share?
Sure. One of my favorite things I've heard is success comes to those who get in front of the inevitable, and anything the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve.
Hmm.
And so, no vision is too big if you realistically believe it's achievable. And you can work hard, you can work smart, but when you learn to work together, that's when the magic happens.
Hmm.
And that includes all stakeholders. And that's what I really feel like the partnership with Nine Dot and the artists that you've brought in, and you've been involved in our projects before, where the more people are just working together, the more the customer is gonna realize. I mean, we walked the alley the other day, and people were turning the milk churns and listening to the music, and just it was like wow, 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 wow. And someone told me that last year the alley at Dairy Block was one of the most Instagram places in downtown Denver.
Oh, it's where everyone wants to go get their photograph taken.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, there's people there almost daily doing photographs.
Yeah, photo shoots happening every day.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, it reminds me we should get someone with a Polaroid to stand there and do really cool pictures and stuff.
Absolutely. Especially in the era of what's happened over the past 12 months, that space being outdoors and activated. Wow, what a boon to that whole block to have that outdoor space be a part of it. So we've been through a lot of significant changes culturally and individually in the past year. What have you learned that you want to bring with you into the future, and what are you leaving behind?
Couple things. One, I've never used Zoom until the pandemic, so that's kind of cool. There is a place and time for Zoom meetings, but I've also learned how much I miss, just being together in a room, working with people to solve a problem and stuff like that.
100%.
Yeah, and then what I want to take with us in the future is always be prepared. And luckily McWhinney has always been prepared, but you never know what's going to happen. And you can never be paralyzed, but always be disciplined, have a vision, move forward smartly, have goals and objectives, etc. But just make sure you're always prepared.
Well, Chad, thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate hearing your perspective. You're clearly a leader in your field and an innovator. And so it's just fun to hear your perspective and share your knowledge and resources with our listeners. Where can people learn more about you if they're interested in learning more about Chad McWhinney or McWhinney?
I'd say go to our website. We've got some good stuff on there, and obviously there's a couple YouTube videos out there and stuff like that on Union Station. Yeah, and then obviously go visit our projects.
Be sure to check out McWhinney and their places that they have all over the country. And thank you again, Chad, for being with us today.